when the conquistador Pizarro captured the Inca city of Cusco in November 1533, its palaces and temples were ransacked, and vast quantities of gold and silver treasure were distributed among the soldiers. People said afterwards of something precious, "It's worth a Peru." And in the wake of the conquistadors, others rushed in to make their fortune. But in that process, many indigenous people were either, effectively enslaved, slaughtered, and others fell ill and died. People were not worth a Peru. It was into this new world that Martin de Porres was born some 46 years later, on December the 9th, 1579, at Lima, a world of Spanish nobles and subject Indians, many thousands of whom died in the silver mines. A society divided along racial and class lines into a strict hierarchy. And in this world, Martin was to be a figure of contradiction. Something of that contradiction was already evident in his birth. His father was a noble, a hidalgo, but his mother an Amerindian. So as an illegitimate mulatto, Martin stood as a sign of contradiction to all those who were tempted to equate purity of blood with purity of virtue. And that contradiction was evident in how his father treated him, first with complete neglect and later with dismay at his association with the order of preachers. A youth, a layperson just 15 years old, working at the Priory in Lima as a sweeper. But it was at that convent where, eventually some 9 years later, he became a lay brother, that Martin became a truly potent figure, someone who in a world of pride revealed the holy in humility of service. And in a world where life was held cheap, Martin demonstrated God's love for the lowly by his gifts as a healer of the poor. He'd been apprenticed aged 12 as a barber and surgeon, and in the monastery he eventually became the infirmarian. But the thing about his healing was that it knew no bounds. Father Christopher de Toro testified that to help the sick in their needs and afflictions, he penetrated the thickest walls and even the locked doors of the cells, and entered the most secret rooms of the novitiate at forbidden hours, having learned by divine revelation what the sick needed and suffered. And he soon brought people back to the Priory whom he found lying in the streets. The supposedly enclosed convent Priory was becoming a public hospital where the poor with no access to private doctors found care, respite. And when the prior put his foot down, I'm afraid Martin simply disobeyed when the casualties' needs were urgent, and then turned his sister's home into a new ward for the convalescents. If Martin wouldn't respect the boundaries between rich and poor, neither would he limit his care to the human. There are stories of dogs, cats, and even turkeys being treated, fed, and cured in his infirmary. Martin, then, was a sign of God's infinite compassion. All of this, not surprisingly, brought fame. Martin could well have escaped his servile life in the order to become a physician to the elite. When once forced to heal the Archbishop of Mexico, someone said, "Brother Martin, would it not be better for you to remain in the palace of the Archbishop of Mexico rather than stay here cleaning the toilets of the monastery?" Martin replied, "I have chosen to be an abject in the house of my God." And in that servile state, he found the freedom to care for all God's children, the abject and archbishops. He founded an orphanage for street children, the Colegio de Santa Cruz. He channeled the money of rich donors into all kinds of charities. If Martin has a lesson for us, maybe it could take the form of 3 questions. Am I picky about who I love, who I care for, who has my time? Is God so choosy? And are there divisions in my own family, in my community, and in my church? Are there divisions in my society which I'm called to cross for the love of God? Let us stand and pray.